Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Okay, so this one is interesting in how it works, and that's how the monster works is actually quite interesting. But also this mystery is just kind of opens us up a couple of mysteries and a couple of other things that were probably going to be important going forward. And also Scooby gets a love interest in this one, which is just kind of funny. But yeah, in any case, the episode opens up with Shaggy and Scooby currently in town getting some ice cream, and then the Shaggy notably has his hair back. If you guys don't know, I haven't commented on it, but throughout the past several episodes since he got back from military school, Shaggy's had short hair, and he's been trying to grow it in. And in between episodes, for several episodes now, he's been wearing a wig. But now his hair is now back to its normal length, so he's no longer wearing a wig as of this episode, which is kind of neat. But in case, as Scooby and Shaggy walk out of the ice cream shop, a strange truck proceeds to drive into the center of town and proceeds to open up, and it's then revealed to be a giant stage with a sign that says the Cabinet of Curiosities on it. And then a man named Gene Shepherd comes out and proceeds to reveal that he's actually come to town and has actually decided to show all of his various curios that he's collected over the years, and tells them that they're in for quite the treat, and tells them to come in if they dare. And sure enough, everybody in the Infant City immediately runs in, including Shaggy and Scooby, who immediately go to investigate and see all the curios. And what we'll quickly find out is that a lot of the curios are very creepy looking and also potentially quite valuable. But of course they look around. But of course Scooby and Shaggy look around, and Shaggy openly admits that it feels like something out of his nightmares. And of course it's at this point where Gene Shepherd tells people with a severe mental disorder to look away, because what he's about to show them is probably going to be the most horrifying thing they'll ever see. And of course this causes everybody to just kind of flock immediately over to the large display cabinet that Gene Shepherd is currently standing next to. And Shepherd then proceeds to reveal the prized crown jewel of his exhibit, and proceeds to open up a curtain to reveal the Hodag of Horror, which it's worth noting is probably the fakest looking monster you have ever seen. And that's not me talking. Several characters comment on it, including Shaggy, who has seen a couple more than his fair share of monsters by this point, at this point in the series, and points out that it is in fact the fakest monster he's ever seen, and that he's seen realer than that. And of course, a lot of people get very discouraged and immediately leave after seeing the Hodag. Well, Shaggy tells Scooby that they should leave as well, pointing out that the place is a ripoff, even though Scooby admits that they didn't pay anything to come in. And of course, this just leaves Gene Shepherd without any real audience for his stuff. But later that night, it's a woman who we later find out is actually Daphne's sister Daisy, and she's established to be a doctor. But in any case, Dr. Daisy Blake is currently sitting in her house, grooming herself and trimming her hair, when suddenly the Hodag of Horror wakes up and suddenly just appears in her house and attacks her. And that is the cold open for the episode. Meanwhile, the Mystery Inc. has since gathered in Fred's house, where they actually do meet with Brad and Judy, and of course what we'll quickly find out is that Brad and Judy constantly complete each other's sentences and offer things that the other forget. And Judy mainly is the one who does most of that. She will, when Brad says something, Judy will actually correct him, and he'll thank her for that. But of course, the two of them then point out that obviously Fred most likely has a lot of questions for why his real parents suddenly came back, and of course they're more than Brad is more than and Judy are more than welcome to answer any of Fred's questions, with Brad opening the floor to Fred to see what he has to say, and of course Fred opens up with the very obvious question of why did they never come back for him, pointing out that obviously it's been many years since that they could have come back and didn't. And of course, Brad and Judy reveal that they don't really have a good answer. The only explanation that they give is that Mayor Jones threatened Fred with bodily harm, and for that reason they were unable to come back until he was out of the equation. So They pointed out that once they found out that he was no longer around, they of course came back the first opportunity they could. But of course they explained that obviously they couldn't. They realized that now that they should have come back sooner if they could have, and openly admit to Fred that they needed to actually that they needed to make sure Fred was no longer in danger before they came back. And of course Fred openly admits that makes sense, and kind of admits that he's just happy to have his parents back. And it's at this point where Velma actually comes forward and then proceeds to explain that their son has actually turned out to be a remarkable young man. And of course the rest of the gang then proceeds to chime in to reveal that Fred is actually one of the most skilled trappers in their town. He is the best. And of course it's at this point where Brad and Judy then proceed to perk up and then proceed to reveal that actually Fred gets that from them. As we quickly find out, they reveal that they're actually trappers themselves, and then we proceed to explain that if Fred has ever heard of this one famous trapping team, and of course Fred obviously has, revealing that he's actually that the team is called Stern and Sterner, but Fred openly admits that he knows about them because they're their husband and wife trapping team who are world famous and have been making traps for a very long time. But then he puts two and two together and realizes that his parents are secretly Sternum and Sternum, and they do admit that. They openly admit that they actually use pseudonyms to actually just sell their traps to the world, while also not drawing attention to themselves. They very much use the Sternum and Sternum trapping team name to kind of hide in plain sight by offering their traps to the world, without drawing attention to themselves and making themselves world famous. And of course they openly admit that they obviously are very happy about the fact that Fred has seemingly taken up their footsteps. And that's just a little interesting little detail. Obviously Fred didn't get his trapping knowledge or whatever from Fred Sr. Obviously, Fred had to have gotten that from somewhere, and they do finally reveal that it came in fact from his parents, which I do kind of find is a really neat detail. Just the fact that he had been building traps this entire time, and it's only now that we find out where he gets it from. He gets it from his real parents. But of course, it's at this point where of course they look off over to the side and note that somebody seems to have woken up. And what we find out is that they actually have a dog named Nova, who immediately comes to sit on Brad's lap. And of course, and as I said, Scooby gets a love interest in this one. But Scooby immediately falls head over heels in love with Nova and makes no effort to hide it. And even admits that a dog pup could get lost in those eyes. But yeah, he just fantasizes about him and Nova running through fields and stuff like that, and he is immediately smitten with Nova. But in any case, it's at this point where Daphne reveals that her parents are actually throwing a welcome back party in their honor, and are telling them that they're more than welcome to come by and be invited. And of course, Fred and Judy very openly accept, pointing out that they'd be more than happy to get to know everybody again, since obviously they've been away from town for a while. But it's at this point where Daphne actually gets a call on her phone, and what we quickly find out is that this is where we find out that it was actually Daphne's sister that got attacked. But what we quickly find out from Daphne's end of the phone call is that Daphne and Daisy don't really like each other. And in fact, when Daphne finds out that she may have in fact been attacked by a giant horrible beast, she's very much perks up at the fact that her sister might be injured, and immediately rallies the gang to actually go and investigate and find out how badly she's injured. And what we find out is that she's not, much to Daphne's annoyment. But and of course, what we find out is that Daisy is very dismissive of everybody around her, including her own sister and her friends. And also we find out that she's actually married to a very wealthy neurosurgeon, as well as being a doctor herself. Which of course only adds to the strain she puts on her relationship with Daphne. But in any case, Daphne very much wants to leave after finding out that her sister is fine, and is very annoyed at that fact. But Velma, of course, goes immediately into investigative mode, and immediately starts asking if she can, what exactly happened, and if she can provide a description of the creature. And of course Daisy is more than happy to help, even though immediately she's very dismissive of Velma and doesn't really, and to the point where she doesn't even remember her name. But She does in fact explain that that she wasn't really injured, but rather had some of her necklaces and other valuables stolen, and also including a little bell necklace that, as we find out, as we quickly find out, was what Daphne gave her for Christmas, even though she openly admits that she didn't remember Daphne gave it to her. And when asked to provide a description of the creature, Daisy is more than happy to oblige. Meanwhile, the rest of the gang is currently exploring Daisy's living room, and there's very obvious footprints all throughout her I guess mansion, since she's rich. But they're quickly exploring the mansion, and as they're running their investigation looking for clues, Scooby decides to actually start coming to people for love advice. Although the people he comes to are Fred and Velma, and they're not particularly very helpful. Of course, Fred openly starts joking when Scooby asks if he wants to ask him a question. And of course, Scooby does come to him for love advice, but of course, Fred hasn't quite worked out his love life yet, so he kind of just thinks that Scooby is joking and doesn't really take him seriously. So Scooby walks off to go ask Velma, who merely points out that she's probably never dating anybody ever again because, of course, Shaggy messed her up. So, yeah, she doesn't hide her animosity for that. She openly just tells Scooby to dump the slacker, to quote unquote dump the slacker loser before he can ruin her life and ruin his life and pull him into an endless well of despair. Which, of course, Scooby points out is a little much, so he just kind of rolls his eyes at her and it just kind of walks off. But in case after getting a description from her sister and running some clues, Daphne then proceeds to bring the gang to the Crystal Cove cheese shop, which is run by a man named Ned Fussbuster. And what we quickly find out is that Ned is he very much loves his cheese, and I can relate to that. I love cheese as well, but yeah, he runs his own cheese shop, and he's very upfront about proper cheese etiquette, and he very much appreciates when people are true connoisseurs of cheese. Case in point, when Daphne points out that she wants the cheese to come in a little earlier so that it doesn't spoil or melt. He's very openly points out that her parents have good taste, and does point out that he very much appreciates the Blake's business, and of course it's this point where we actually see his server Roberto, and Roberto is odd. I'll openly admit that Roberto's a little strange, and it's implied that there's something else going on with him because Roberto, notably first and foremost, he doesn't speak the entire time he's on screen. And of course, what we quickly find out is that he's very strange in that he brings a platter of cheese over to the rest of the gang, and then proceeds to cut it with his foot and then leave. And that, notably, is a very strange thing. But nobody comments on it, so they don't really bring it up. But of course, it's at this point where Daphne has finalized the description of what actually attacked Daisy, and brings it to the rest of the gang for examination. When as of course Shaggy immediately recognizes the creature as the Hodag of Horror, and of course he quickly points out that he doesn't think that the monster is actually the one responsible, because as he quickly points out, it's this fake monster from the Cabinet of Curiosities, and of course, when the rest of the gang become interested and ask Shaggy to show them, he of course immediately brings them to the Cabinet of Curiosities in the middle of Crystal Cove, where he then proceeds to bring them to the creature's podium, where of course Fred does indeed remark that it is indeed a very fake-looking creature, and even though Shaggy does openly admit that it is indeed the crown jewel of the exhibit and the crown jewel of the Cabinet of Curiosities, but. And of course, everybody notices the very obvious problem that Shaggy has brought up, and that the Hodag of Horror looks like a very lump and lifeless toy, and doesn't think that it should be able to move. But it's this one where Gene Shepard walks in and reveals that he points out that he's very proud of his Hodag of Horror, and proceeds to point out that the Hodag is a master of deception, and is meant to lure somebody into a false sense of security until they can attack them when they're not looking. And And of course they then point out that that's a very strange behavior. But also Velma then proceeds to ask him what exactly is in the box underneath the Hodag. But Gene Shepherd just gives her a very dodgy answer, not really explaining what it is, only that he brings it out once a year. And when she asks him why only once a year, he merely exclaims that it needs to breathe before storming off. And of course, Velma immediately notes that he's suspicious, and notes that something obviously that Gene Shepherd's sketchy behavior is definitely worth looking into a little bit more. It's at this point where the power actually goes out in the Cabinet of Curiosities, and suddenly they hear there's suddenly a bell ringing, and then the Hodag of Horror immediately springs to life and immediately starts attacking the gang. And of course the gang immediately try to evade the creature, but then Gene Shepherd walks out trying to investigate what exactly is going on, and the Hodag looks at the neck around it, the key around his neck, which is designed to hold his most precious treasure, and immediately tries to snatch it from him, but the rest of the gang intervene, and Velma then chases off with a shield while Fred grabs a nearby camera and proceeds to flash it in the eyes to stun it, and he tells the rest of the gang to cover their eyes, but Scooby doesn't listen, and he winds up wobbling into the rest of the gang, and this causes them to knock over, and eventually the Hodag leaves after being stunned and walks out of the Cabinet of Curiosities, howls at the moon from the top of the traveling freak show, and then immediately wanders off into the surrounding areas of Crystal Cove, never to be seen. And of course, it's at this point where Sheriff Stone immediately comes in to do investigative work, and of course, Gene Shepherd does point out the very obvious problem that he doesn't think the police are going to help, and of course, Sheriff Stone then proceeds to ask what exactly is going on with the Hodag of Horror, and also points out that it may not be covered under the Crystal Cove penal codes. He quickly points out that he doesn't feel like a haunted stuffed toy thing is really in his jurisdiction, but he does his job anyway, and of course proceeds to ask him about the Hodag, and what we'll quickly find out is that the Hodag is a creature that comes out at night, and it likes to eat dogs, which of course causes Scooby to immediately somewhat panic, and of course Sheriff Stone immediately takes full advantage of this. He immediately asks if the Hodag is partial toward talking ones, and of course this causes the two of them to him and Scooby to immediately start butting heads, and eventually the rest of the gang have to break them up. But of course when Gene quickly realizes that all of this was a waste of time, he immediately goes back into his curio shop to go check on his prized possession, and very ominously he puts his key in the lock on the special lockbox, and opens it up and tells his prized possession to not worry, and that it's safe now, and that's still safe. And of course this is all once again very creepy behavior, but of course it's at this point where immediately after this, the gang goes to Daphne's welcome back party with her hosted by her parents, and everybody and a couple of familiar faces are there, including George Avocados, who was actually going to be the incumbent mayor for Crystal Cove, and it's very possible that he just didn't decide to run. We haven't seen him since then, and it's weird that he didn't decide to run for mayor when Janet Nettles was running, but of course it's possible that finding out that his grandfather or father actually did steal a diamond back in the day, that probably ruined his chances of running for mayor, and that's probably why we haven't seen him in a while. But of course, everybody is just kind of enjoying the party and having a good time, and of course, what we quickly find out is that that Fussbuster is very open about the fact that he doesn't want to see empty plates of cheese, and tells Roberto to go fetch more before the Blights discover his quote unquote mistake. So of course, Roberto immediately scoops up the platter of cheese and stumbles off to go find more cheese. And Meanwhile, Brad and Judy are talking with Daphne, and And of course, they do point out that they're not entirely sure why the Blakes actually went through all that trouble to actually welcome them back to Crystal Cove. And but Daphne merely points out that that's just the way her parents are, and point out that they deserve to have a big welcome back party for being away from Crystal Cove for so long. And it's implied that Brad and Judy knew the Blakes from back in the day, because they point out that was the first time they've ever heard of something charitable from them in a long time. But of course, Brad merely points out that they should just enjoy their reunion. At which point Roberto walks up to them with a platter of cheese, flashes them a smile, and they then proceed to take some cheese from him before he wanders off to give more people cheese. And of course, it's at this point where Daphne reveals that she's actually been meaning to do this for a while, but since she met Brad and Judy, but then reveals that she actually found Judy's locket in the Crystal Cove caves, and proceeds to give it back to Judy. And Judy, of course, doesn't fully understand where Daphne got it, but proceeds to thank her anyway, and gives her a big hug. And then also remarks that she's happy that her son has a woman as wonderful as her in his life. And Daphne doesn't have the heart to tell him that they're not technically not a couple anymore. So she very much just kind of hides that fact from the two of them. Meanwhile, Scooby is kind of going on a bit of a cheese date with Nova, where the two of them are actually chowing down on various cheeses, and Scooby is just openly very happy. And there's also a Lady and the Tramp joke that's thrown in there for good measure. But of course, Shaggy visibly has a very upset look on his face, and is just kind of half-heartedly poking at his cheese. And Velma quickly notices that something's wrong, and he points out that obviously he feels he's got all of this cheese surrounding him, and for once he's not chowing down on all of it, because his best friend and chowing partner is currently off with a girl making Google eyes at a girl. And Velma just points out the very obvious irony in that. As she puts it, irony. My name is Nova. And of course, Shaggy points out that he guessed he deserved that. But in case, as the two of them are actually sitting down eating, Marcy actually winds up walking in with her father, and of course, Velma then proceeds to give her a quick wave. And of course, it's at this point where we actually reveal that Sheriff Stone is actually running security detail for the party, and he wants to be inside the ballroom with everybody else eating cheese, but he doesn't, because he has to maintain his duty. But then he hears a ringing bell, and then he sees the Hodag of Horror out of the corner of his eye, and of course the sheriff immediately goes to investigate and try and figure out what he's looking at. And it's at this point where the Hodag actually winds up attacking him and barging through the window. And from there, the Hodag of Horror, despite the best efforts of the patrons to get away, it proceeds to attack several people in the ballroom and proceeds to drag them away. And of course, everybody tries to run and flee from it, but the Hodag of Horror immediately starts attacking them. But and of course, it's at this point where Nova eventually panics and tries to run off. But the Hodag immediately sees her, hears the bells ringing on her neck because she's wearing a bell necklace and a bell collar, and immediately grabs her and runs out of the Blake mansion. And then eventually the power does come back on. And we see that the several patrons that the Hodag attacked are unharmed, but they're missing all of their valuables, which of course they then note, which of course is a very strange behavior. And of course they then proceed to go, and of course it's at this point where the gang then proceeds to go and investigate the cabinet of curiosities again, pointing out that obviously if the Hodag is attacked, that it most likely is back at the back of the cabinet of curiosities. But when they go to investigate, not only do they not find the Hodag, but they then proceed to find a large pile of treasure and stolen valuables just sitting in the middle of the cabinet of curiosities, with Velma remarking that they seem to have found their thief. And it's at this point where Gene Shepherd walks in and demands to know what they're doing in his attraction. And of course he's immediately arrested, because obviously he's prime suspect now. He was found with all the stolen valuables, and he openly admits that he didn't steal anything. But Sheriff Stone doesn't buy it, because obviously he was found with all the valuables. But And of course, then proceeds to point out that he's put it all in lockup and has actually impounded it, and then proceeds to explain that after 30 days he gets to keep all of it. Which of course Velma points out that isn't how that works, because obviously it's supposed to be evidence, but of course Sheriff Stone points out that he's sheriff, he can do what he wants. And he even remarks that he's got a whole bunch of other cool things now, including a puzzle box that he pulls out of his back pocket, which he openly admits he doesn't fully understand what it does. But when he sits it down on the table, it proceeds to solve itself. And then he hears a knock at the door and goes to investigate. And some armor's voice just whispers things at him, and then he slams it in his face and calls it a weirdo. And there's very obviously some sort of what is it? Some sort of what is it? Hellraiser reference. That's very much a Hellraiser reference, because that is a reference to how the fact that Hellraiser similarly comes out of a magic puzzle box and attacks people. That's the whole story of that. But yeah, in any case, with that, they then proceed. It's then revealed that Mayor Nettles has actually given Mr. Incorporated their own office in the Crystal Cove basement for solving several of their mysteries now. And of course, for specifically catching Crybaby Clown, because he had been rampaging through the town up until recently. So of course they immediately go and investigate and quickly discover that their new office is the old junk room, which of course they quickly realize that they need to clean out, and they do start working on that while Velma actually starts looking into more of the information regarding the Hodag of Horror. And of course what she finds out is that she's actually been looking into the idea of training animals using bells, which of course was a very obvious notable thing when the Hodag of Horror had just been rampaging through the streets stealing things. It has just been stealing things every time there was a bell was heard. And Shaggy openly admits that he does believe that there is in fact something strange with that, because he heard a bell as well when the Hodag was about. He heard a bell ringing and quickly points out that that may in fact have something to do with it. And of course, it's at this point where Velma quickly reveals that you can actually train animals to using bells, and also points out that she's been looking into it and points out that obviously it very much fits the behavior of the Hodag. And Fred, seeing and hearing all this, concludes that it's most likely time to actually go and trap the Hodag of Horror. And of course he quickly points out, and of course they quickly spring into action. And what we find out is that they currently just have Gene Shepard's key just sitting on Sheriff Stone's desk, while Sheriff Stone and Velma watch the whole thing. And of course Sheriff Stone is very open to staunch. He's very openly objects to the idea of letting the Hodag just steal all of his stuff, pointing out that obviously they can just pretend the mystery is solved and just keep everything. But of course Velma just shoots him a look and continues to watch the key. And sure enough, eventually the Hodag does in fact show up, eventually coming through one of those flap windows at the top of the doors. He winds up coming through one of those and winds up grabbing the key and escaping. And Velma then tells Fred that what's going on. And what we find out is that they're actually using code names through walkie-talkies. And Fred is very annoyed by that fact, pointing out that obviously he doesn't like his code name of just being Scarf Boy, and points out that next time he'll actually pick all the code names. But of course they then keep their eyes peeled. And what we find out is that Daphne is actually currently watching the lockbox inside of the Cabinet of Curiosities, and eventually the Hodag does come in and opens the lockbox and steals whatever's inside. It steals a large wheel-shaped bag and proceeds to run off. And it's at this point where Velma tells him through the walkie-talkies that the Hodag is currently approaching. And then Fred proceeds to spring his trap into action. And what we quickly find out is that it's a very simple but effective trap, where they have a set of bells on a pulley system, and by ringing the bells, it attracts the Hodag to actually go and attack them, and this causes the bells to actually just kind of lowered up a nearby tower and into a trap door, which of course which Shaggy, who is with Fred at this time, then proceeds to open it and drop it into a cage, and they then proceed to wheel it out of the tower and into the streets. And of course they quickly find out that there's they proceed to actually open the cage and unmask the Hodag to reveal that it's actually Roberto. Which, of course, they remark is a little bit strange, but then Velma actually gets a closer look at Roberto, and it's revealed that he's actually a monkey. They actually pull off his mask. It's actually revealed that he's wearing a second mask, and he's just a monkey. But and of course, they point out that this is all very strange, but it's at this point where it's revealed that Gene Fussbuster is actually the one responsible for the Hodag of Horror, and he's currently holding Nova hostage and is threatening to drop her if they don't throw up with the very important valuable that they found. And of course, they then proceed to unwrap the valuable to reveal that it's actually a very old piece of cheese. Which of course, Fred points out is very strange, but it does make sense why Mr. Fussbuster would be after it. And he then proceeds to go into his backstory about why he wants the piece of cheese. As it turns out, Mr. Fussbuster has been using the fact that he's trained Roberto with bells to just steal things. As we find out, he learned while he was in the army. While he was shipping overseas, not in the army, but shipping overseas. He learned how to train a monkey to steal things, and had been using that to build up his empire and create his cheese shop. But what we quickly find out is that Roberto went a little bit bell crazy and started stealing the bells themselves, in addition to any valuables that he found. And this eventually caused Fussbuster to become crazy, because eventually Roberto just started escalating and stealing anything with a bell attached to it, which of course resulted in him bringing back several various livestock creatures and other things. And of course he remarks that they don't want to know how many hunchbacks he brought home, but which is of course a reference to the Hunchback of Notre Dame, because that's a very central thing where there's a hunchback that plays with bells. But of course he then proceeds to point out that the reason that he trained Roberto to steal the key to Gene Shepherd's safe because he wants the cheese. He wants the cheese because it's very valuable. It was made 500 years ago in Crystal Cove by a Spanish cheesemaker. And he wants it because it means he can finally retire and go to a country that actually appreciates cheese. And of course, he then proceeds to demand that they hand over the cheese, that they throw up the cheese, or he drops Nova. But Scooby, very determined to rescue Nova, proceeds to throw the cheese like a discus, hit Fussbuster in the face, and then proceeds to catch Nova while Fussbuster lands in a nearby bush, and possibly hurts his back. I should mention, he falls from at least 1 or 2 stories. He should at the very least be badly injured from that. But of course, with that, Fussbuster then proceeds to be arrested alongside Roberto, and of course, Fussbuster then proceeds to remark that he would have gotten away with it and had it been for those darn bells. And then he proceeds to get hauled off to Crystal Cove prison. And of course, the gang then proceeds to offer Gene Shepherd his cheese wheel back, but he merely exclaims that he doesn't want it anymore because it's cracked and therefore no longer valuable and is now worthless, and he no longer wants it. And of course, there still remains one strange little mystery, and that's the fact that Gene Shepherd's there at all. As Velma explains, they don't get many traveling shows like Gene's in their town, and Gene just ominously remarks that the cheese told him to come there, and then he proceeds to pack up his stuff and leave. And of course, the gang do remark that that's a bit of an odd thing to say, but then they proceed to actually crack open the cheese and discover that there's actually a 4th piece of the Planet Spirit disc inside, which of course does mean that they now have 2 pieces of the Planet Spirit disc, while Pericles has the other 2, and there's 2 left to find. And of course, this does seem to open up something interesting that I'll talk about in a minute. But in case it's at this point where the various human members of the original Mystery Incorporated all come together, where they come together on the premise of a meeting. But what we quickly find out is that nobody knows who's actually called the meeting. Of course, you've got Angel Dynamite who walks up in the middle of the woods, and she and Mr. E immediately talk about who might have thrown the meeting, and of course both of them, Mr. E denies having gotten them all together, and assumes that it was Brad and Judy who got them together. But of course, Brad and Judy point out that they weren't the ones who arranged the meeting either. And then it's revealed that Professor Pericles was the one who got them all together, and he's currently sitting in a tree outside of their field of vision. And And after calling to them, he then proceeds to reveal that their successors have actually gotten 2 pieces of the Planet Spirit Disc now, while he has the other 2. And of course, this causes Brad and Judy to gasp audibly. But he then points out that obviously this can't continue, and then proceeds to offer a proposition, and that's where the episode ends. So yeah, first and foremost, this episode opens up some interesting lore regarding the Planet Spirit Disc, and that it caused Gene Shepard to just kind of hear whispers in his head and caused him to act oddly. And it of course caused him to come to Crystal Cove for seemingly out of the blue, for no real reason. It just told him to come to Crystal Cove, which of course is a very strange thing, and I'm curious as to how that's supposed to work. But yeah, that does open up some interesting things with the Planet Spirit Disc. But more importantly, all 5 members of Mystery Incorporated are back and are now working together. The original Mystery Incorporated. They are all together now, which of course means that they're most likely going to be working together again going forward. I'm not sure what that's going to entail, but clearly they don't want the kids to have the piece of the Planet Spirit Disc. Obviously, they don't want their successors to have it. So it is going to be a very interesting turn of events when they do start fighting over the Planet Spirit Disc. And we've seen how that worked before, because obviously the Darrow family, they started fighting over their piece of the Planet Spirit Disc, and it caused them all to just kind of somewhat kill each other, or at least die of old age. But yeah, we've seen how this works. We know this isn't going to end well. We know this isn't going to turn out great, but I don't know. We'll see. We will in fact see how this goes. But there are some interesting things regarding the Planet Spirit Disc, and I am curious as to what exactly is going on there. There seems to be something strange going on with the Planet Spirit Disc if it influenced Gene Shepard to come to Crystal Cove, but by not really telling, it just influences behavior. Because obviously he wasn't the villain, but he was acting very strangely, and it seems like the Planet Spirit Disc was actually a very large part of that, considering it had been in his collection for God knows how long. So yeah, who knows? So yeah, who knows what's going on there? That's a very strange thing that I think they're going to address as well. But in any case, yeah, that's my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. I post updates over there. You guys might want to see them, because I do occasionally point out what things are going on with the channel. And I do think you guys would want to actually know what's going on. So yeah, I use Twitter mainly for updates. Go check that out. And also go check out my Patreon. I mainly use that to fund projects, and but go check that out. Link is down in the description and on the end screen. Just go support me. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does help me out. So yeah, just go check that out. But and also, speaking of the end screen, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked inside end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace! Alright. It's in here. That's for certain. Where? I have no idea. We already got this one, don't we?